What's your take on this too? Do you think the ETF floor was overhyped?
Definitely no. Look, obviously what you were describing is all data correct, but I think you got to zoom out a little bit further and realize that this ETFs didn't exist because of the regulatory problems in the United States. They didn't exist, and in the last 2 or 3 weeks, over $700 million have flown into XRP ETFs, which is just pent-up demand from institutional investors, from investors who want access because they don't want to custody themselves, what have you. But look, again, if you zoom out to the macro level, the total ETF market, only 1 or 2% of the total ETF market is crypto. I will bet anybody here that a year from now, that will be more than 1 or 2%. There's going to continue to be inflows, and yes, you can take a snapshot of time and say, okay, there's a billion left Bitcoin ETFs or whatever the data you cited a moment ago. But if you zoom out a little bit further and say, okay, over 2026, do we really think crypto ETFs are only going to be 1 or 2% of the total ETF market? No chance. And so that, again, it's one of those macro tailwinds where Ripple sits in a position where we see, particularly from our Ripple Prime, the prime brokerage business, we see a lot of interesting activity where institutions that have been on the sidelines, maybe because of regulatory clarity, maybe because of risk aversion, for whatever reasons they've been on the sidelines, they're getting involved. And they're starting small, and they're going to walk, then they're going to crawl, then they're going to walk, then they're going to run. And I think it's going to create a lot of tailwind.
So this moment in the market hasn't necessarily spooked institutional capital. That's what you're saying?
Definitely not.
Okay.
And that was Brad Garlinghouse from a little bit of an older clip, but I bring it back up because we are now in 2026. This is shaping up to be one of the craziest years for crypto yet, with all of the big major headlines being regulations, ETFs, institutional adoption, mainstream. I mean, this is truly the year where we could start to see a much bigger spotlight put on crypto than even 2025. And I know that price action in 2025 was not the best, right? However, 2025 was a crazy year for overall adoption, acceptance. I mean, we witnessed so many crazy moves happen in 2025 with ETFs as well, institutional players, Wall Street jumping in. But 2026 is looking as though it's going to be much bigger. And of course, yes, Brad Garlinghouse is even saying ETFs are going to grow well beyond the 1 to 2% that they are currently at with the entire ETF market. And if that's the case, then we're also witnessing much larger demand this year as well for ETF products. And you could probably already get what I'm trying to, get to at this point, which is, of course, yes, the XRP ETFs. I do suspect that the XRP ETFs are going to see a lot more demand. I think that we're going to most likely witness the ETFs around XRP. I would argue they're probably going to make major records. And the reason why I say that is because we're already at the point of, I think it's like 30 days of inflows or something like that. It's kind of crazy, but we're already breaking records. We're already making history. The launch back in November was absolutely insane. And so far, we're already at, for the day, over $17 million. And let me just refresh this, make sure that this is fully up to date. I mean, $28 million already. And this was not open that long. This was only open for like a couple minutes. So we already are witnessing nearly double that volume on the spot base. We're already over, currently speaking, $70 million on the day between leverage volume and spot volume. So this is, so far a very crazy time for XRP because XRP is really showing everyone just how much demand there is for these products. On top of that, XRP has always been sought after from like some of the largest players, especially like big money and smart money. And I think that that's showing up in a big way, even during the down markets. But we're also still looking at potential candidates for, major XRP filings going into this year, which is of course BlackRock and Fidelity. Those are like the main two that I'm looking at. VanEck, I really doubt that VanEck is going to be launching an XRP product, but hey, I would love to be wrong. And the only reason why I say that is because, VanEck has been very slow on adopting any sort of thing around crypto. They do have a Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana ETF, but, we'll have to wait and see what happens here. But, I'm definitely watching for BlackRock, because I do think that BlackRock is going to be the stage setter. I think that they're going to be one of the biggest players here to really, make a big shift and wave in the ETF market for XRP. But on top of that, just looking at the ETF tracker, guys, I have to interrupt the video because we have a serious problem right now in crypto, and that is data breaches coming from Ledger. That's right, the cold storage device creator, Ledger. This is unacceptable. I've talked about this in the past as well because this is a very common theme with Ledger. It's been happening for years and years and years now. This is also why I promote iTrust Capital. iTrust Capital obviously is an affiliate of the channel. They are a sponsor of the channel as well. Yes, I do make money from iTrust Capital. I'm very transparent about that. However, I also did research on iTrust Capital for years. I've utilized iTrust Capital for years. I've followed iTrust Capital for years. This is a platform that I trust, that I have utilized, that I love their products, especially the premium custody account, because it allows me to sleep at night with zero concern about my digital assets because it's a fully closed loop system. Not to mention, they have partnerships with Coinbase Asset Management, Fidelity Digital Assets, and even Wells Fargo and Fireblocks. This is one of the best platforms to custody your assets. Obviously, if you want to have full control of your keys, then hey, Decent Wallet is very good as well. But this is a fully closed loop institutional grade custody platform that I personally think is one of the best, especially to get away from things like this. So if you guys do want to sign up, there's going to be a link down in the description below as well as in the comments below. And let's jump back on into the video. We're well over $1.5 billion already for ETFs in terms of the assets under management. Just making sure that this is also up to date. Looking at the XRP locked, this has been rising slightly. I think that we're up about like 6 million that was locked in these vaults over like the last couple days, which again, it's not a bad amount of XRP being locked up. I know that everyone is still looking at this being like a supply shock method, but I think that's going to take a little bit more volume than what we're actually seeing right now to really get to that supply shock theory. But I think that we're starting strong here with the ETFs. And I think that with the market bouncing back the way that it has been, if we see that continuation, then these ETF products are going to see a lot more inflows. In fact, if we're going all the way back to November, I do think that we'll break this record. This is our record day so far for the XRP ETFs, and it's a little over $140+ million. I think it's closer to like 150. We can easily break that record. But it's questionable on when that's going to happen. I do think that it's going to happen once we start to see FOMO really kick in. Right now, we are starting to see a slight bounce in the market, but it's a very slight bounce. We're still, a little bit of ways away from celebrating this move, but it's a very good move. Now with XRP, talking about a little bit TA, I know that a lot of you guys out there probably don't really follow TA all that much, but we have been in this downtrend for quite some time. And with our recent wick, I do think that the bottom is in. I know that a lot of people will, go on the fence and say like, oh no, I think that we're going much lower. I personally see the bottom being in here. I would be very shocked to see us break down below our prior lows. The biggest key factor here will be us breaking over this like $2.30 level. Yes, we still have a lot of resistance that we're fighting right now currently. But once we flip this, we should get into this red zone up here, which is a lot of resistance going all the way back to 2025 and even 2024, which is why I figured just to kind of throw on a rectangle here just to show you guys the resistance zone, because there's a lot of levels here to break over. Initially $2.60, $2.94. After that, we really want to break over like the $3.06 level. And then after that, we really target the all-time high, or what a lot of people have been calling the all-time high. I'm still going off of $3.84. So I'm just going off of this being the cycle high, then $3.84. And then after that, we should be on our way to $5+. But it's going to take a little bit of time right now, depending on how fast the market can have a much larger reversal. I have been tracking Bitcoin. Obviously, I've been watching Bitcoin over the last couple of days, as you guys do know. I do think that Bitcoin is starting to have a much larger breakout here. We did have a strong weekly candle close above the prior highs. So we did break over that resistance, and Bitcoin looks very good here, especially in terms of like bullish momentum. The big thing here with, of course, Bitcoin is clearing that 95K level. I think that that's going to be a major key area of interest for Bitcoin. After that, we will most likely break to 100K plus. and that should carry the rest of the market with it, including even XRP. It's questionable on if we're going to have a complete reversal on Bitcoin to, like, for an example, like 110K or anything like that. But there's a lot of levels for us to have, like, really clear on Bitcoin as well, very similar to XRP. I think initially, like, the 101K level is going to be a key level. After that, roughly 104.5K. And then we also have another level up here around like 109K. So there's a ton of resistance that we need to flip, a ton of support that we need to regain. But I do think that Bitcoin will eventually, retest those levels and potentially even flip those levels. And that should also carry most of the market like XRP. But remember, that will most likely have an initial sell-off before that happens, very similar to like the price action going back to April. I think that we're kind of at that point in the market where we are officially bottomed out on major bearish momentum, because everyone has been very bearish. I think sellers have dried up, and now you're starting to see that, take effect on the chart. So with that, let's go and look at how the ETFs have been performing. So yesterday, the ETFs did very, very well. We got a full breakdown of just how the ETFs performed on, the last week. So if we're looking at the full week of trading, we did see Bitcoin have some significant inflows, roughly over 400 and almost 60 million inflows. Ethereum over 160 million, Solana over 10 million, and then XRP over 43 million. Now, I do think that this is an inaccurate post, because if we're looking at the complete week, Ethereum ETFs did see an outflow. So it was inflows across the board except for Ethereum. So Bitcoin did have 459 million. And by the way, this is from December 29th through January 2nd. So Bitcoin had roughly 459 million plus inflows. Ethereum had negative 161 million outflows. Solana 10 plus million, and then XRP 43 million. This is clearly showing us the demand for XRP products outside of Solana and even Ethereum. This is very good to see. Again, this is in a down market. This is at a time where there's not a ton of hype around XRP. So the fact that we're still seeing inflows like this is telling us that there's institutional demand, there's retail demand, and this is all building behind the negative price action. And I've said this many times over, that this is all essentially pressure that's building behind the scenes that will lead to increased prices. And right now we're starting to see the price jump. I think that there's going to start to, have, a little bit of hype return to XRP. I'm not saying FOMO just yet. I think that FOMO will happen once we break over the prior highs. But once we're at those prior highs and breaking over it, I do think that the inflows for ETF products for XRP are going to be pretty crazy. Now, also, we did see an update from Nate Geraci regarding ETF products going into 2026. And we have here, there are currently 130 plus crypto-related ETF filings with the SEC. Welcome to 2026. So many storylines this year: further mainstream adoption of spot Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs, growing interest around Solana and XRP ETFs as well. But the biggest story, in my opinion, will be huge year for crypto index ETFs. And yeah, I just think that this year we're going to see so many ETF launches and products going live. I also think that we'll see the BlackRock ETF for XRP. And the only reason why I say that is because let's go back to what I said, right? XRP is making history, is breaking records right now, currently, for the most amount of trading days of inflows. BlackRock's IBIT, their Bitcoin ETF, currently holds the record of 72 trading days. Big shout out to Chad Steingraber for this. Currently speaking, we are on roughly 37 days of straight inflows here. So we are nearly at, we're over the halfway point here for, breaking this record. So, we still have quite a bit of days to, get through here, but I don't think that XRP is going to have a hard time breaking this record at all. The question is, if it breaks this record, how big of a spotlight will there be on XRP and on this record being broken from mainstream media? And will that force the hand of major players like BlackRock, for example, to file for an XRP ETF? I think that it could very well be. And the only reason why I say that is because we already know that BlackRock's ETFs now became their, top revenue source. That got announced back at the end of November. They hit well over $70 billion in assets, and they generated hundreds of millions of dollars in fees. On top of that, we do know that BlackRock recorded well over $25 billion in yearly inflows in 2025. So again, it was a huge year for BlackRock and their ETF products. But the question here is is BlackRock looking at altcoins? Are they looking at things beyond Bitcoin and Ethereum? Or are they just playing it safe with Bitcoin and Ethereum products? I think if they are, they're making a big mistake. And I think that the mistake has already been made, especially if we are looking at how many inflows there has been for XRP and how, solid the ETF products have been for XRP. So again, I think that, BlackRock sitting on the sidelines here, I think that they'll have their hand forced at some point in time here. I think that it's just, if we're thinking about it from a business point of view, it just makes sense for an XRP ETF product from BlackRock. I mean, every big player already has an XRP ETF. And I think that once BlackRock files for an XRP ETF, we'll also see Fidelity fall in line as well. Fidelity is probably next up because they already have a Solana-based ETF. This is why I'm saying like BlackRock is probably playing it safe, which is Bitcoin and Ethereum, because they don't even have a Solana ETF. So Fidelity would most likely be next. I think it's crazy to think about this, but I think that if Fidelity filed for an XRP ETF, that would force BlackRock's hand and vice versa. So either one of these two players launching an XRP ETF or filing for an XRP ETF, it's going to force the hand of the other one. So I'm definitely looking forward to that this year. But, I do agree with Brad Garlinghouse. I think that this is going to be a crazy year. Nate Goroshi is also looking at this being a crazy year for ETFs. I think that we're at that ETF mania phase for crypto and for even XRP. Believe it or not, I do think that XRP products are going to start to, go crazy this year. And I think that we're going to see a lot more filings for XRP-based ETFs from additional, players. So I'm very bullish on ETF products this year. I'm very bullish on XRP, obviously, this year and the entire crypto space. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video.